Oh man, welcome in after that awesome intro. The new video looks great. Loving the background too. I got lucky enough to have this man with me to talk about the SEC. George, how you doing, man?
Doing great. How about you, Jason?
It's all right. I've been watching this Chattanooga Furman game. It's been blowing my socks off. Stevens looks amazing and is just playing out of his mind. And right now, UNC and Hofstra are tied up. 15 seconds left. It's just it's just part of it. You have to enjoy every second, and when it's March, watch as much as you can because you have to. There's so much information coming in, but let the people know. For example, you have an article coming out today, which is going to be super pumped about. But what is your expertise? Give them some background on you.
All right. I'm writing for CBB Review, as does Jason, specializing in the SEC. I've got my SEC preview coming out today. That's going to preview the conference tournament. Looking forward to some good basketball there. We're starting off on Wednesday with that Ole Miss South Carolina game. And then LSU and Georgia also on Wednesday. Those two games are going to kick off the tournament.
Yeah, and it's just so crazy how I guess changes this conference has really been this year. I was really expecting just Arkansas to run away with it, and the different teams that are really showing up. I mean, Texas A&M is making a great push right now. Kentucky's coming into form. Everybody had written them off, and they're doing their thing and just making a big mess of it. And clearly, Alabama number 2 in the nation for clearly good reason. I mean, they're showing up, and they have a lot of stars, and so clearly top 4 seeds are Alabama, Texas A&M, Kentucky, and Missouri. So that's always a fun one. But man, it's just I have to know. If you're like me, got to know what team do you think wins it all?
You may be thinking similar to but I got Texas A&M winning it all, and they've been the hottest team in the league, besides maybe Vanderbilt lately. They've been great. They just beat Bama coming off that. They're going to have tons of momentum. They've got a favorable draw. They'd have to go through either Auburn, Arkansas, then Kentucky or Vanderbilt probably. That's, I don't want to say an automatic bid to the finals, but that's an easier road than what either Alabama, Missouri, or Tennessee is going to go to.
Yeah, I mean, I've really just been watching Texas A&M because former Shockers on there, Dexter Dennis, and I'm super pumped for the kid, and he's playing great defense. I just one of these days his offense is going to show up, and it's going to be a scary time to watch him play because man, he's just such a talent. But yeah, I definitely agree. Texas A&M is playing just out of their minds right now, and it's just so fun to watch a team that is good on both sides of the court, and it just shows. And I mean, we're going against the grain because I know a lot of people are going to expect Alabama to win it, but man, with all the hubbub surrounding Miller, I just think the rest of the team is all caught up in it, and they're just not having that focus that they need.
It's affecting for sure. Ever since the Brandon Miller news came out, that first game back against South Carolina, they looked shaky on offense and defense. I think Miller had 41 of the team's 78 points. It's crazy.
Yeah, he went off after that too. It's just crazy to see him do that. But yeah, the rest of the team is what you're worried about because he needs help. I mean, he can do a lot by himself, clearly scoring those 41 points. But man, it's just tough. And I mean, we've talked about Brandon Miller clearly, but I have to know, is there's a player that you're just excited to watch? I mean, I touched on Dexter Dennis too, but who are you excited to watch from this SEC?
I think sticking with Texas A&M right now, Wade Taylor has been on a tear. I think he's hit 20 points in maybe 6 of his last 7 outings, been on fire. The whole team for the Aggies is good, but Taylor is the heartbeat. He's going to make some moves. If they play Arkansas, that Anthony Black or Nick Smith Jr. matchup with Taylor is going to be off the charts. Amazing. In terms of the top half of the bracket, Kobe Brown is back. Last time they played Alabama, and I'm not foreshadowing anything, not predicting. They do match up with Bama in the quarterfinals, and they could very well pull that upset off. They lost by I think 21 at home to the Tide back in February, but Kobe Brown was out. They shot 10.7% from 3, lowest mark of the year. They hit 35% of their shots against Bama. That's the matchup I could see going either way.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the SEC isn't. I mean, from what I've been watching this year, nobody's been super consistent on their style of play, and a good example of that is Tennessee, who's just been so hot and cold when it comes to their offense and just not showing up, and it's just tough because it's so difficult for these teams to really match up. And Kentucky's on tear, Texas A&M's on a tear. I mean, you have so many good teams that are. I mean, Auburn is 20-11. Mississippi State is 20-11. It's just crazy that these teams are over 500 and aren't really even being talked about to win. And so, with that in mind, I have to know who's your dark horse to win this conference.
I think at this point it's got to be Vanderbilt. 8-1 in the last 9 games. They did lose Liam Robbins for the year. That's a big blow. But they managed to beat Kentucky and Mississippi State since that happened. And Ezra Mannion, Tyron Lawrence, all capable of stepping up. That's going to hurt. Losing Robbins is going to hurt for sure, no doubt. But coming into that second round game, they're either going to play LSU or Georgia. Now, they did lose to LSU, but they could totally beat both of those teams. That would set them up with a rematch of Kentucky, who they've already beat. And then either Texas A&M, Auburn, or Arkansas.
Yeah, man, those are. I mean, again, those are all teams that are, like I've said, it's so hot and cold. It's hard to tell what team's going to show up on any given night. And in tournaments, especially, everybody tries to show up, and if they show up and show out, it's tough to beat really any of these SEC teams because they can really just offensively come at you with waves, and it's tough to keep up. I mean, clearly they have all these different weapons, and I mean, for example, my dark horse is clearly Auburn because Johnny Brew, man, he's just one of those players that I'm always impressed with. The fact that he is that small school mid-major guy that is coming into Auburn and really showing up for him has just been an impressive. He's really come into learning about the league and really playing it out, and it's worked well for him. And I just think that it really allows for this to be a good time. And I mean, that team they just have a lot of weapons. It's so balanced, and so it's definitely a lot of fun. And so we've talked about it. I need to know, how many teams do you think we've talked about? I mean, like I said, 8 or 9 teams are over 500. How many do you think are going to make into the tournament?
I think at this point, you got to go with 8. Alabama, that's a lock. Tennessee, lock. Missouri, lock. Kentucky, at this point, they've played themselves into a lock. You've got Texas A&M, lock. Arkansas, maybe a little bit bubbly, 10 seed, 9 seed, but I think they're a lock. Auburn, with that win over Tennessee, that puts them in. Mississippi State, that's where it gets a little bit hazy. I think they win one game, they beat Florida, they're in. They lose, they could be sweating a lot on Selection Sunday, but we'll see. And then Vanderbilt, that other team on the bubble, I think they would have to at least reach the final if they want a chance for an at-large bid.
Yeah, I mean that's probably close. I mean, I'm going to say yeah, I agree with Alabama, Texas A&M, probably Kentucky. That one's more iffy for me. Tennessee is locked just because of the fact that they have so many wins and they have been playing well. It's just, golly, they're just one of those teams that are so frustrating to watch. And then after that, I get lost because when it comes to bracketology, that is not an area that I want to be in. All these games that are going on, all the different things you have to take into account. Being a bracketologist would just drive me crazy with all the different skill sets and having to compare these teams on paper. And I mean, clearly when you look at, for example, I had Ariel on yesterday and we talked about the Big 12, and it's just like, I don't want all of them in. That doesn't make any sense. They've already all played each other. I don't want to see them playing each other in the Elite 8 or the Sweet 16. Right. We've seen those games. I want to see other games against other players. And so, yeah, I mean, like you said, though, there could very easily be 7 or 8, and you're looking at the same thing from the Big 12. It's just an incredible, these power conferences really, especially in basketball, can win on any night. And it's just a fun time. And really, when it comes to March, it's one of those things that you just have to look at. So with that in mind, do you have, how far do you think, let's say, for example, Alabama, how far do you think Alabama's probably the best choice. I'm going to say Texas A&M is going to go in the tournament when it comes to looking at their overall body of work and how far they could really go.
I think with Texas A&M, it's really going to depend on who they match up with in the tournament. They're a really good free throw shooting team. They're shooting at 76% clip. They've made 600 free throws this season. That's first in D1, tops out of 363 teams.
Wow.
If they draw a disciplined team, they're looking at around a 7 or a 6 seed right now. If they match up with a really good mid-major at 11, one that doesn't foul, group of seniors, they could be exit first round. If they match up against 11 seed like Rutgers or something, then end up with a 3 seed in Tennessee maybe. They probably wouldn't put Tennessee in that same quartet. But they match up with a 3 seed that matches up with them well. Texas A&M could very well make the Elite Eight even more.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably about right. I mean, I'm clearly a little biased because I do think that they are going to have a decent run and are the most likely to advance, probably the furthest in the SEC. Is there, I mean, I guess a matchup that you're most excited to see in this tournament? I mean, not necessarily the big NCAA tournament, but in the SEC conference tournament, is there a matchup that you want to see? Make sure it's a must-watch TV for you.
Well, that first round matchup, or I guess second round, but you already know the teams between 7 Arkansas and 10 Auburn, and that could very well be a semifinal matchup. Going into the year, they had SEC media poll had Arkansas at 2, Auburn at 4. These teams have the talent; they just haven't really put it all together. That's a great matchup. You got Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, Nick Smith versus John Broome, KD Johnson, Wendell Green. Both those teams are stacked with talent. That could be a great watch for second round.
Yeah, I mean, and the guy who is somehow just scoring out of his mind for Arkansas, of course, Ricky Council, the former Wichita State player. I just had to throw him out there because got to show my love for my school. Graduating from there, so
Ricky might be the best dunker in all the
SEC. Dude, he is so bouncy. It's so fun to watch him. I mean, and the fact that he's coming off the bench is just extremely frustrating to me. So I'm glad he's getting to show out in Arkansas for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to be a fun one because I do think that both of those teams are underseeded just because they've had some rough stretches. And I mean, Arkansas without Nick Smith for pretty much a majority of the year was tough to watch. And so they've found their groove. And I think adding him back in is definitely going to make it more enjoyable for that team, and hopefully they can have a decent run this year. But they need to win some games in this tournament to have some success in the NCAA tournament for sure.
With this tournament, I mean, the big picture has got to be injuries. Whether they're just coming back or they've been lost for the season. Arkansas with Trevon Brazile, totally different team. You saw at the start of the season, got lost against Creighton, some of the best basketball I've ever seen before. In a out of conference play at least. When they had Brazile, they had a solid front court piece. Now, they got the Mitchell twins too, but Brazile really held that team together. Look at Tennessee, already struggling offense, but that loss of Zakai Ziegler is really going to hurt. He's their main ball handler, their main facilitator. What happens when they lose him? We don't have a big enough sample size to even know that.
Yeah, that's the other portion of this. I mean, there's right now you're getting to the point where bodies are starting to break down. People are getting tired. It's tough to play, and I mean, you have all these back-to-back games that are just going to start to stack up, and hopefully you're ready for it because I mean, anybody can show up, and yeah, that also is a big change. I mean, God, he was just playing out of his mind early in the season, and so he was a big spark for that team as well. But it's just we've talked about a lot of the teams. I need to know. I mean, I think Texas A&M is clearly the one I think is going to go the furthest. Is there a team that you would prefer that you think could really make a big stand in the NCAA tournament?
I think besides Texas A&M, I do think Texas A&M is going to be the last one standing. But besides them, Missouri really could be that team. Now it's going to take 3 really good shooting games for them to make the Elite Eight. They're going to have to be on top of their game because they're not a good rebounding team at all. But if they make their shots, that won't matter. Des Moines Hodge, excellent defender. Kobe Brown, he can shoot the three. He's shooting over a 40% clip. They've got Isaiah Mosley off the bench if they need him. That whole team is tough. They're resilient. They might not have the best defense, but if their offense is clicking, it might not matter.
Yeah, man. It's like I said, there's just so much talent. I mean, we haven't even touched on Kentucky and Oscar Tshiebwe, who, of course, is still averaging double doubles, and it's just insane. I mean, there's just this is clearly a power conference team just because of the fact that or power conference just because of the fact that everybody is so talented that you see playing. I mean, we haven't touched on a lot of big players. Wendell Green from Auburn's another big one that is just super impressive, and it's just crazy. So with this being such a powerful conference, is there one that you are worried? I mean, clearly outside of the Big 12, because I think everybody's worried about them just based on the fact that they have a majority rule over everything, it seems like, in college basketball. But is there another conference that you're worried about really matching up against for the SEC teams?
Yeah, I think with the big men talent of the Big Ten, look at Purdue. You got Zach Edey, Trace Jackson Davis at Indiana, Hunter Dickinson at Michigan if they get in. Indiana, talk about Indiana, but Illinois, we have their big men. Hawkins, a little bit on the shorter side, but he's great. He could match up well against almost any SEC team. You look at Northwestern, they don't have a bunch of big dudes, but their team is so consistent in Big Ten play.
Yeah, they're so disciplined.
You'd hate to see them match up against hardly any of these SEC teams. So they very well could pull off a win against them.
Yeah, I mean, Trace Jackson Davis is another one who's super impressive. Another player who's averaging double doubles with Zach Edey. I mean, golly, that's another that I get it. I mean, that's another reason that it's so interesting when it comes to March, because you have all these different styles of play and seeing what's going to win. Because a lot of, for example, in the Big 12, there's not a whole lot of dominant big men. But in the SEC, like for Kentucky, Tshiebwe kind of is a dominant big man. I mean, but how would he match up against somebody who's like Zach Edey, who's 7'4" and is just a monster? It's a completely different style of play. And so seeing the coaching aptitude that it really takes to be come up with different game plans and how you're going to attack different players, I think that's some reason it's so much fun to watch in March and all these different games possibilities. So just want to say, man, this has been a blast. I have
Thanks
to know, have to make sure you get plugged. So where can people find you besides clearly CBB Review?
All right. On Twitter, y'all can find me at George_Bagwell and on Instagram at George.Bagwell1.
See, works out great. I mean, I clearly enjoy all the work because I love watching the SEC, but I really enjoy all the smaller conferences because, like,
of course,
it's teams you don't see. I mean, you can turn on any weekend and on any of the big channels and see the big teams play, but watching the small ones is always what's going to be surprising to me. And I mean, when it comes to tournament time, it's impressive. But
yeah, I mean, it's really anyone's game. I'd like to see an SEC team make the Final Four, but I'd be much happier seeing, Furman or College of Charleston make it,
That'd be so much fun. I mean, shoot, UNC Wilmington's in overtime with Hofstra right now, and it's just crazy that it's just all these little teams, and both of them have great records outside of their conference. Like it's just crazy to see how these teams. I would love to see how they would do, granted, with more out of conference games during conference play sprinkled in, like a random weekend where they have those matchups like the Big 12 versus SEC does, or something along those lines, where you have different kind of scales of players and teams that are going against each other that really help boost each other's, I mean, more likely boost the smaller guys' resumes, but it's just interesting to also have get your coaches into that as well. But man, really appreciate it. I'm so excited to read your article when it drops.
Thank you.
And hey, I just had my MVC one come out on CB Review. The fact that Drake just came through that tournament and didn't even really sweat it was a blast for me. And I just, being a Wichita State guy, that the whole MVC tournament's just a blast from the past. I love St. Louis and Arch Madness, and it's just a good time. But really appreciate you coming on, and glad that I wish the article was going to be out already, because I'm just so ready to watch and read through it, and clearly watch more basketball, because that's what I'm focused on. But thank you so much, man.
Of course.
And it's just a blast getting to talk to you. So with that, we'll wrap it up, get out of here, leave you all be. But with that in mind, make sure you flip on TV, watch some basketball. There's a lot of great basketball. I mean, the WCC final or semifinals are tonight, so you'll get to see those West Coast small teams with Gonzaga, St. Mary's, all of them playing tonight. And so make sure you watch that. But outside of that, you guys remember, keep up the nonsense.